You pull up to the pump. You squeeze the handle. The pump clicks off. You squeeze it again, slowly, trying to get a few more drops in. It clicks again. You top it off one more time for good measure because round numbers feel satisfying. And also because gas is expensive and you want every last drop you paid for. Here's the thing. You just did something the engineers who designed your fuel system specifically engineered against. That extra squeezing, the topping off, you may have just broken part of your emission system, or at minimum, put it under stress it wasn't designed to handle. And separately, that tank you think is full? It was never designed to be full. There's intentional empty space built into every fuel tank on every car sold in the US, on purpose, by design. Not because the manufacturer is cheating you out of range, because if that space didn't exist, your car would have a very different problem. This is about fuel tank design, vapor space, evaporative emission systems, and why the click means stop. Let's get into it. Gasoline is a liquid, but it doesn't behave like water. It evaporates at normal temperatures, significantly. Leave a cup of gasoline out at a warm garage and you'll smell it from across the room within seconds. Those are fuel vapors escaping into the air. Fuel vapor is flammable. It's also a hydrocarbon emission that contributes to smog and air quality degradation. Inside a sealed fuel tank, those vapors have nowhere to go. They build up in the space above the liquid fuel. That space, the airspace above the fuel, is called the vapor space or ullage. And its existence is not optional. It's required. Here's why. Fuel expands as it warms up. When you drive, your engine generates heat. That heat radiates. Your fuel tank, sitting in the underbody of your car, heats up. The fuel inside it expands. If your tank were completely full, liquid to the brim with zero headspace, that expanding fuel would have nowhere to go. Pressure would build. The tank is a sealed system. The outcome of a sealed, overpressurized fuel tank is not good. At minimum, fuel gets pushed back out through the filler neck, which is why you sometimes see small fuel dribbles near the cap after overfilling. At maximum, structural integrity issues. Neither is what you want. The intentional vapor space in a fuel tank is typically around 10 to 15% of the total tank volume. So if your car has a 15-gallon tank, roughly 1.5 to 2 gallons of that tank's capacity is designed to remain as vapor space during normal operation. This means the full reading on your gauge, the line sitting at the top, doesn't correspond to the tank being physically full. It corresponds to the fuel sensor float reaching the designed maximum fill level, which is below the actual top of the tank. The gauge is showing you full in the operational sense, maximum fuel, with appropriate headspace maintained. Your fuel gauge reads full. The tank is not full. This is intentional. The spec is working correctly. The manufacturer did not steal 1.5 gallons from you. Think about it like a coffee thermos. You fill it to the line on the inside, not to the absolute brim where liquid sloshes out the second you tip it. The line is where full actually means full for practical use. Same principle. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. You know those fuel vapors building up in the vapor space? They have to go somewhere, and releasing them directly into the atmosphere is illegal in the US. Has been since the early 1970s under the Clean Air Act. So your car has an evaporative emission control system, EVAP. This is a sealed system of hoses, valves, and a component called a charcoal canister, also called the vapor canister, that captures fuel vapors before they can escape into the atmosphere. Here's how it works. The charcoal canister is a container filled with activated charcoal, the same concept as a water filter or an air purifier, just for fuel vapors. Fuel vapors from the tank are routed through hoses to the canister. The activated charcoal absorbs and stores the hydrocarbon molecules. When you drive and the engine is running, fresh air is pulled through the canister, stripping the stored vapors off the charcoal and routing them into the intake manifold where they're burned with the regular air-fuel mixture. The canister resets. The cycle repeats. This is elegant engineering. The car captures its own emissions, stores them, and burns them as fuel when conditions allow. You're not losing those hydrocarbons. They get combusted and contribute fractionally to propulsion. The atmosphere doesn't get them. Everyone wins. Now we come back to you and your pump handle. The pump nozzle has an automatic shut-off mechanism. When fuel reaches the end of the nozzle inside your filler neck, the fuel backs up and triggers a vacuum-operated shut-off valve in the nozzle. That's the click. The nozzle detects that the fuel level has reached a certain point and shuts off to prevent overflow. That point is calibrated to leave the vapor space intact. When the pump clicks, the tank is at the designed maximum fill level. The vapor space is still there. The evap system is intact. When you override the click and keep adding fuel, you're filling the vapor space. You're pushing liquid fuel up into the area designed to hold vapor. Liquid fuel is now adjacent to, and sometimes entering, the evap system hoses and the charcoal canister. The charcoal canister is designed to handle vapors. It is not designed to handle liquid fuel. Liquid fuel in the canister saturates the charcoal, damages its absorption capacity, and can block the purge valve that controls vapor flow to the engine. A saturated canister can't absorb new vapors, can't purge correctly, and may cause raw fuel vapors to vent to the atmosphere, which is exactly what the system exists to prevent. A saturated APAP canister will eventually trigger your check engine light. The diagnostic code for this is typically P0442, P0455, or related ABAP leak or purge codes. The repair cost for a damaged charcoal canister runs from a few $100s to over $1,000 depending on your vehicle and how accessible the component is. That round number satisfaction at the pump is not worth a canister replacement. The click means stop. You've probably noticed that sometimes the pump clicks much earlier than expected, like when you know the tank is almost empty but the nozzle cuts out after a few gallons. This is annoying and common, and it's not always your evap system being sensitive. The automatic shutoff in the pump nozzle uses a Venturi effect, a small tube inside the nozzle that creates a pressure differential when fuel flows past it. When fuel backs up in the filler neck and covers the end of that tube, the pressure differential reverses and triggers the shutoff. Factors that cause premature clicks: filling too fast, which causes fuel to foam or splash back in the filler neck and momentarily cover the tube; filler neck angle on your specific vehicle, which affects how cleanly fuel flows in without turbulence; atmospheric temperature, which affects how much vapor pressure is already building in the tank as you fill, and the angle your car is parked at. If you're getting premature clicks, the solution is to fill slower. Squeeze the handle to a lower flow rate. The fuel has time to drain into the tank without backing up. The nozzle stops clicking early. You get your fuel without fighting the pump. There's a physics angle here that most people don't think about. Gasoline weighs roughly 6 pounds per gallon. A 15-gallon tank at full operational capacity holds around 90 pounds of fuel. That weight is distributed low in the vehicle, typically under the rear seats or in the rear underbody, which affects the car's weight distribution and handling characteristics. As you burn through fuel, the tank gets lighter. The weight distribution shifts slightly. This is usually imperceptible in normal passenger cars, but in performance cars and motorsport applications, fuel load is a significant variable. Racing teams calculate handling balance based on fuel burn rate across a race. The car at the start of a race handles differently than the same car 2/3 through the fuel load. Engineers design suspension setups around target fuel levels. For your daily driver, this is academic, but it's the reason why some performance cars have their fuel tanks positioned very deliberately, centrally, low, and with attention to how the tank empties, rather than just wherever fits. Modern fuel tanks are almost universally made from high-density polyethylene, HDPE plastic, not metal. This is a fairly recent shift from steel tanks, which were standard for decades. HDPE tanks have several advantages over steel. They don't corrode. They can be molded into complex shapes that conform to the underbody structure of the car. This is important for packaging in modern vehicles where every cubic inch of underbody space is contested by the fuel tank, the exhaust system, the spare tire well, and crash structure requirements. They're lighter, and in a crash, plastic deforms rather than cracking, which reduces spill risk. The downside of plastic is permeability. Hydrocarbons can slowly permeate through plastic over time, which is an emissions concern. HDPE fuel tanks are multi-layer. They have an outer structural HDPE layer, an inner EVOH, ethylene vinyl alcohol barrier layer that's nearly impermeable to hydrocarbons, and sometimes additional structural layers. That's why a modern plastic fuel tank looks like a simple black polyethylene blob, but is actually a sophisticated laminated structure. Steel tanks still appear on some trucks and older vehicles, and some performance applications prefer them for durability and resistance to certain solvents. But for mainstream passenger cars, HDPE laminate is the standard. You may have heard the term saddle tank, common on trucks and older vehicles with dual fuel tanks. A saddle tank is split into two lobes that straddle the drive shaft tunnel or other underbody components, connected by a crossover tube so they function as a single reservoir. The evap complexity on saddle tanks is higher because you now have two vapor spaces to manage, two float sensors to monitor, and a crossover connection to seal. On older trucks with dual tanks and a selector switch, the evap system was significantly more complex, and a common source of issues as those trucks aged. Modern saddle tanks are typically a single molded HDPE piece in a saddle shape rather than two separate tanks. Cleaner, simpler, same footprint benefit. The diesel difference: diesel fuel evaporates much less readily than gasoline. Diesel's vapor pressure is significantly lower, meaning it doesn't produce as much vapor at ambient temperatures. This is part of why diesel engines require compression ignition rather than a spark. The fuel doesn't vaporize easily enough to form an ignitable air-fuel mixture the way gasoline does. Because diesel doesn't vaporize aggressively, diesel vehicles don't require the same charcoal canister evap system as gasoline vehicles. This simplifies their fuel systems in one direction, though diesel emission systems are more complex in other ways. Particulate filters, NOx reduction systems, and so on. Diesel tanks still require vapor space for thermal expansion reasons. The fuel still expands when heated, but the emissions management side is fundamentally different. In a completely different way, not fuel vapor, but thermal expansion of a different kind. Lithium-ion battery packs are similarly sensitive to being at maximum capacity under thermal stress. Most EV manufacturers recommend not charging to 100% for daily use, typically suggesting 80 to 90% as the daily target. The reason is that lithium-ion cells experience more stress at the top and bottom of their charge range, and keeping the battery below 100% provides headroom for regenerative braking energy that comes in while driving. The parallel to fuel tank vapor space is imperfect but conceptually similar. The engineers built in operational headroom, and the instructions say not to fill to the absolute maximum for everyday use. Same underlying logic, thermal management and system longevity expressed through different chemistry. Your fuel tank is intentionally never completely full. Around 10 to 15% is reserved as vapor space. Fuel expands when heated. Without vapor space, that expansion has nowhere to go. Your evap system captures fuel vapors with a charcoal canister and burns them in the engine. The pump click is calibrated to stop at designed max fill level. It's not conservative, it's correct. Topping off after the click pushes liquid fuel into the evap system, which damages the charcoal canister. A damaged canister triggers a check engine light and costs real money to replace. Premature clicks are usually caused by filling too fast. Fill slower, problem mostly goes away. Modern tanks are HDPE laminate, multi-layer plastic, not steel. Diesel tanks skip the charcoal canister because diesel doesn't evaporate aggressively at ambient temperatures. The click means stop, every time, no exceptions. Later,